Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about a point that gets misunderstood when it comes to muscle growth or hypertrophy. And in this case, we're not talking about strength, we're not talking about intramuscular coordination, we're not talking about specific joint angles, certain performance elements, all of these different things. We're talking about purely the muscle getting larger. And that's something the majority of us care about. Even for me as a strength athlete, I care very, very much about that. To the point to where something like maybe 70% or more of my actual weekly training looks like what a lot of people would call hypertrophy work. But what people need to understand when it comes to muscle growth, they get caught up in the wrong ideas, right? They don't understand both what the anecdote in the real world has shown or what the wide variety of scientific literature has found regarding muscle growth. And it's because people want some secret method, right? They want this exercise will make whatever muscle grow, right? This specific magic exact routine will make you jacked. Okay? That's all nonsense. It's all BS. What makes muscles grow? Work. Workload. And up to a certain point, your muscles don't even care about where that workload comes from. People say, what do you mean? Well, I'm telling you that your 1 rep max lifts performed at the start of a workout, like on a lot of my max effort days, they will contribute to the growth process. Now, people say that's crazy. No one's going to get bigger off doing 1 rep maxes. No, they won't. If that's all they do, you're correct. But let me ask you a more serious question. Let's say you do some really high reps behind it. Okay. Let's say, you just saw me do that heavy deficit deadlift. What if you came behind it and you did 4 sets of 15 pretty much to failure with a good morning afterwards? Which one is going to have been both more work and going to stimulate more total muscle fibers through your hamstrings, erectors, glutes, all that? If you had just done the high reps or if you had done the heavy max first? Well, we know that the heavy max already pre-fatigues and attenuates the upper threshold fibers. It is actually going to have a larger training response. Okay? It's going to have a larger training response. Ramping up to a max with several heavy singles is going to hit upper threshold muscle fibers and all the motor units and muscle fibers all the way up to it through rate coding. Now, reasonably speaking, could the 15s have a larger hypertrophic response? Well, there's not even a could. They do. That's not even a point of debate. We know they do. That's a lot more work. But if you add the max first, do you technically stimulate more growth, more fiber fatigue, definitely hitting the upper threshold ones? Yes. You absolutely do. In fact, it's going to be just as much stimulation as a set does taken to failure on the failure rep, right? What do we mean there? With every rep you do in a set, the closer you get to muscle failure, the more growth stimulus the individual rep provides. Okay? Hopefully people grasp that. Meaning, like let's say that we're getting a training stimulus with a 10 rep set, take it all the way to failure. You do know that some muscle growth and training stimulus occurred for hypertrophy before that point, right? Before the failed rep. Rep 6 was producing growth. Rep 7 produced a slightly larger response. 8, an even slightly larger response than 7 because we're getting more and more fatigued while still hitting those same motor units. Okay? So you get all the way to rep 10 and then you miss a rep. The 1 rep max hits just as hard as that 10th rep did. In terms of muscle fiber activation, okay? Does that make sense? Now, is it as good as all those reps combined? No. But that fatigue accumulates through the workout. So if you do a 1 rep max, the other work is going in slightly pre-fatigued. There's a larger training response. Can 5-rep sets produce maximum muscle growth? Yes, if you do enough of them. Can 3-rep sets? Yes, we know, it's been studied. 10s, 15s, 20s. Hypothetically, 30-rep sets can produce very, very large amounts of muscle growth. So which one's the best? None of them. None of them. See where we're going here? They all potentially have slightly different pathways. In fact, the studies that have looked at it, some of them have found that when multiple rep ranges are used, a tiny amount more muscle growth is stimulated if done over the course of a week and in your different training sessions and periodization, right? In some studies, not all of them, a small amount of additional muscle growth occurred, all right? So if anything, the evidence would lean in the direction that doing more than 1 rep range would be the way to produce maximum growth. All right, what else have we found? The more work you do, the more muscle grows, as long as you can recover from it. By work, what do we mean? Challenging reps, challenging sets, irrespective of the rep range. Okay, they all stimulate a physical adaptation in the muscle fiber. They all have the potential to thicken it. There's no one that's actually everything. It's about, did you do work and did you recover from it? And the studies usually show that as long as recovery is on point, usually, although with greatly diminished returns, the more work you do, the more muscle growth you see, again with the caveat being if you can recover from it. But it is work. It is hard work, and there is no way around that. You're going to need to train pretty hard if you want to gain muscle. You're going to have to, and I don't care what your goal is for gaining the muscle. In my case, I gain it to get stronger on my big lifts. I want to be stronger, more powerful, more athletic. I'm not chasing a look, but I damn well better train those muscles. Very similar in often cases to how the guy chasing the look does. Not going to be exactly the same. You have to do work. What about exercises? It doesn't even matter that much, and here's why. There's no best exercise for any muscle. In fact, the studies have found that when more than one exercise is done that targets a muscle, and by that I don't mean you need to do multiple smaller single joint exercises, although if you have a muscle that you're particularly worried about bringing up, it would be wise to incorporate one. Right? I mean, that's what I do, even as a strength athlete. If my triceps are lagging, and they are lagging, and they're always lagging, of course I add some extensions in. And take them pretty much to failure too, right? Of course we add a smaller movement in. I don't just close grip bench and dip. I've got to do some extensions also, right? But let's get over to the point. Usually when more than one exercise is used, we usually see more muscle growth, even if the sets and the work are the same. Okay. And it comes back down to work. Maybe you pick an exercise that isn't as good on some EMG or some activation protocol that was used to test the activation. One of them does better. Does that mean it's automatically going to be more muscle growth? No. Maybe in a very limited environment, meaning if you tried to minimize and do as few sets as possible to get any muscle growth, and then you did the less effective exercise on the EMG, the exact same amount of reps and sets, you might see a difference. But none of us are doing that. None of us are trying to hit what's just the bare minimum I can do and hopefully pick the best exercise, because again, we know that using more than one exercise matters. Muscles care about the work being done. Now, are certain joint angles and stretches and movements going to hit certain muscle fibers that others do not? Yes. But that's going to accumulate for a pretty small amount of it. So in theory, we could argue all that we want. That some people say, well, a wide stance squat doesn't build the quads amazingly well. Well, that's not true. It actually does. We're like, well, because you get a less deep knee angle, even though the activation is the same on the studies. If your knee angle is slightly less than it usually is to hit parallel with a wide stance. One reason we do it for powerlifting. All right, we can break parallel with less knee bend. All right. But if you really wanted big quads, you wouldn't only squat for them. So it's kind of a moot point. It's still about the cumulative amount of work that you did. So here's what I would ask. Okay, let's say you pick a squat that you think is better, a full squat. And you compare it to whatever, my wide stance box squat. And that's all you do, but I also go drag a sled every week also. Who's going to get more growth stimulus? Me. I am. Because I've done 2 different very, very difficult and intense exercises for that same muscle. Of completely different modalities on top of it. Okay? Muscles care about work. They care about how much work they did and do they recover from it. That's what determines how quickly your individual muscles will grow from a training side. Now, there's tons of other things. There's genetics, there's nutrition, rest, there's anabolics. All these things, right? They all matter. Of course they matter. They matter tremendously, enormously. But on the training end, for hypertrophy purposes, the muscle just cares about how much work did you do. How much stimulation did it get through total work. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.